Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever, whenever you are listening to this. It has been quite a while since I uploaded my last video, and I wanted to give you not only a life update, but some little nuggets of wisdom that I've been reflecting on over the last month or so. Since my last video, some of you may or may not know that I'm a massive football fan of Tottenham Hotspur, and we have just won the Europa League um, final. Well, that happened a couple of weeks ago. I flew out to Bilbao. I was there. I watched the game. It was amazing. Now, this is not a football video. However, there have been a lot of things going on in the football realm, which I follow quite closely. And I've been thinking about transformational coaching, financial coaching, and I'm always analyzing what's going on, not only on the pitch, but also in the wider, bigger picture of football in general. Now, for those of you who probably don't care about football or maybe have no interest in football, for context of this video, I am going to be making reference to sort of the season at large and how we can actually build resistance and break through resistance by learning some lessons based on what's been going on with Tottenham Hotspur this season. So, for context, Ange Postecoglou, who is the Tottenham manager, he has been manager for 2 years and he signed on with a 3-year contract. And I think when we try and start something new, you might feel like you're having a lot of resistance, or you're like, why is this thing that I'm working towards or building my business and it's not quite reaching the success or the heights that I actually want? And this is kind of the situation, drawing a parallel to how Tottenham Hotspur has been in the last 17 years, because we haven't won a trophy in 17 years. Now, when we think about when we create a business, we are doing that because we want to have impact in the world somehow. We want to give back, right? And so the reward for that, or the reflection of that, is the financial reward that we actually get. Now, obviously, financial freedom, as I've said many, many times, is not just about the monetary value, but it's about how we feel about a certain situation. And so, really, I want to draw a parallel to when you're feeling stuck and you're in this sticky situation and you've got all these doubts and people around you. The outside noise is like, you're never going to make it. You're never going to achieve the dreams that you want to achieve. That's absolutely delusional. And who the hell do you even think you are for coming up with this business plan or coming up with this service, right, that you want to start helping people with? And so all of the outside noise might be going, oh, this is a pyramid scheme, coaches helping coaches, or, sharing your expertise in some kind of way, like to other people that might seem strange, even though they on some level might have bought a service in the past. But as a business owner, when you go into the service-based industry, there is a lot of noise, right? And especially now with AI, there's this whole thing about authenticity and, are people just creating posts using ChatGPT? And there's all this noise that's kind of trying to break down this new industry, this new wave of entrepreneurs and business owners, CEOs that are creating, some people, very good incomes from the services that they offer online. And then there are people that are not. Right. So we can compare this to the teams in the Premier League by the ones that typically always do very, very well, and those that don't. So Spurs would probably fall into the category where they have been quite consistently good over the years, but they have never actually achieved the heights of what is expected of them, i.e., the trophy. Now, it's the same as in business, right? You set yourself maybe a financial goal or a target, and you want to work towards that target. But we have to remember that the end goal is not the metaphorical sense of trophy or financial reward if we're drawing parallel with your business, right? That is not the end goal. And often we make that the end goal. We say, if we don't achieve X by X, then we failed. If we don't achieve a trophy by this date, then we failed, right? The project has failed. But in reality, that's not how life goes, right? And in the bigger picture of life, there's more going on than what we can see. And if bad things are happening, we need to be asking ourselves, what is this teaching us? Why is this happening to us? What lesson are we supposed to take away and learn from this? Maybe we need to pivot. Maybe we need to implement something. Maybe we need to change something. But the minute we give up, the minute we quit and we're basically signaling that we're not backing ourselves. We don't believe in the project that we're actually working towards. And this is why so many people, don't make a success out of their business, or financially, maybe after 4 years. It's a common sort of time frame where startup businesses either fail or succeed, right? Excuse me, just itching my eye. But the 4 year is kind of like this metric, right? Where people are like, either their business has succeeded or it hasn't in that time. And that is often where I think the statistic is something like 60% or 80% of businesses fail within the first 4 years. And that decreases slightly if it's like in the first year or the second year. It's something like 50% or 30% of businesses don't make it past their first year. So yes, you can have a business but to have a successfully financially successful, thriving business, obviously that is the metric, right? The metric of the goal that we want to have X amount of revenue. In the same way that in football, we're always after the prize, the trophy. So what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that in the first year that this new manager, Ange Postecoglou, came in, it was a little bit wavy. It was a little bit like we shot up at the beginning and we had this like massive, amazing motivation, 10 games on the run, winning. And then we kind of dropped off. Okay. And then there was this rebuild, and this year in one league, the Premier League, we haven't performed so well. We've come 17th, which is terrible if you don't know anything about football, absolutely terrible. And yet they've won, on the other hand, a trophy. And so there's almost like this mask, right, that you have to be overall successful in everything to actually be successful as a football club or a business, right? And life is not always linear. Things don't always come through in the way that we expect them to. So there's more to this trophy that Tottenham have won. It also gets them into this thing called the Champions League, which is the top four teams in the Premier League. They automatically get qualified. But if you win the Europa League, you kind of get a free backdoor pass. And this is what it's like in our businesses, in life in general, right? Sometimes we manifest something, but it doesn't quite come through in the way that we think it is. And so what can happen is we feel guilty about that. We're undeserving of that. And that is why we see with a lot of businesses, people might decide to change their product or change their service before they've really given it a run to see whether it is actually that successful, whether that's because they're scared that it actually is going to work, because there's always ways to find, making what you want to happen. If you actually manifest it and your mindset is of a positive mindset and you're always looking for solutions, you're always going to get there. You're always going to make it happen. And in the beginning, that might not happen in the way that you think it's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that it's not supposed to happen, right? In fact, it is supposed to happen. That is the universe telling you, right, you are on the right path. Now you have to keep going, but you have to overcome this increasing resistance to get to the next level, because there is always a next level. The more we learn, the more we realize we don't know, right? We don't know all the answers. So the ultimate prize is not what we think is the prize, right? The prize is always bigger than that. There's always stuff that we can't see that's going on in the background that is part of the success. And that might be how we live on a day-to-day basis, whether we take the holidays we want to take, et cetera, right? So the way that we expect things to come through don't always come through in the way that we expect them to. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It doesn't mean we're undeserving. In fact, it means that we're doing all of the right things and we should be doing more of that and even more of other stuff as well, whatever piece of the puzzle is missing for you, right? Whether that in practical terms is like in your business, maybe you need to hire staff, maybe you need to cut back on expenses. Maybe you need to look at your finances a little bit more. Maybe you just need to do a check in every now and again because we should be checking in with our finances at least once a month. Okay. So this is all coming back to something that I've spoken about multiple times in multiple of my masterclasses and my videos, and that is the hero's journey. The hero's journey is one of my favorite analogies of all time, and it absolutely ruins any film or book that you've ever read. So, yeah, if you don't want every film ruined, probably switch off now, but I do speak about it quite a lot. So the hero's journey was created, I think it was by Joseph Campbell, but there is a video somewhere floating around either on my Facebook or you can probably search for it on YouTube. So the hero's journey is this idea that when we start off on a path, right, when we start off working towards a goal, often we get a shift of momentum, which is because we are signaling, we are putting out the frequency of this new energy, this new transformation that we're going through. But what happens is we hit some kind of resistance at the first hurdle. And why does this happen? Why do we hit this first hurdle? Well, this first hurdle is a challenge because we need to overcome it. We need to become that person who is able to maintain that consistency, that drive, that success that we're so after, right? So we might hit some kind of plateau, we might hit a peak, or we might even drop off entirely. And that is all part of the process. That's all part of the process. Nothing comes overnight. Life, it can be easy and that all depends on your outlook on life, right? Two people can see the same situation in very different ways. That's because perspective, right? We all have different perspectives. So some people might encounter exactly the same challenge, but because of their circumstances or their life position, it might seem more or less challenging depending on where you're at in your life, right? So we choose to change our perspective on situations all the time, right? Something bad can happen to us and we can turn it into the greatest life lesson ever that we learn from that breaks us through to that next level. But often that doesn't happen initially because we feel like maybe we're unworthy of it, that we haven't done something right. And so we actually need to push through that, break through that, double down, become more confident in what we're doing or what we're offering. And when we do that, that is when the universe is going to respond to us. I've noticed some in my past videos, there's been a bit of lagging. So I'm hoping, because I'm noticing there's a bit of lagging, but I'm hoping that that's not going to stick. Anyway, so hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, any film that you watch, any book that you've ever read, beginning, middle, and end, there's always some kind of challenge, right? So the people that come to me, they are probably struggling with their finances on some level. Maybe they're struggling to make money. Maybe they're struggling to earn money. Maybe they're struggling to pay attention to their finances, be financially responsible. Maybe they're overspending. Maybe they're a bit scared to make investments. Maybe they've made investments and now they're thinking about backing out and second guessing every single financial decision. So finances should be easy in the same way that businesses should be easy, in the same way that, you know, I'd say running a football institution, but that's not necessarily true. But this is the thing, right? Whatever level you're at, there is always going to be some kind of resistance. And when we break through that resistance, that is when we see the success on the other side. And if we quit before the breakthrough, we never find out. We never find out what the end of the story is, or we create the end of the story, which is in fact a failure because we've stopped before we've been able to actually prove ourselves right, that we could manifest that vision that we so deeply hold for ourselves. and it's totally possible to achieve. It's totally possible to achieve. So there is always going to be peaks and troughs in the journey. Hero's journey, right? You're gonna do amazing things. You're maybe gonna drop off sometimes, and you're gonna feel that resistance and leapfrog again. And you are doing this multiple times in your life already, right? In many areas of your life, maybe not right now. Maybe you're not going through that period of growth. Maybe you're feeling that you're about to take that leap and you're going to be going through into the next phase of your life and transforming and becoming the person that you were meant to be, right? And if that's the case, then you're almost definitely in the right place. And you can do my money personality quiz, which is in the links below or in my bio. Yeah. So, um, I don't know if this video's made much sense because it's probably for a lot of you been totally random and you're like, why the hell is she even talking to me about football? But honestly, I was in Bilbao a couple of weeks ago. Best 3 days of my life. Okay, maybe not of my life, but like it was definitely up there with like one of the best few days of my life. And there's definitely a lag going on here. So I'm gonna have to look at this situation because it's not great, is it? It's not great. Um, yeah, so up there with the best feelings. And I think when you get a taste of that, right, obviously with football it's different because as a supporter you're supporting the success, you're supporting the team even when they're not doing great. And in some ways we have to be our own cheerleaders in the same way, right? We have to support ourselves even when things aren't going so great, right? We have to be the person that's going to back us because as I said at the very beginning, all that outside noise, if we actually buy into that outside noise, then we're going to break very, very easily and succumb to all of that noise. When in reality, just do you. Um, just do you. Because there is no other you. That's the beauty of it, right? So only you can achieve that calling that is inside of you for bigger, greater, more amazing things. And if the success that you achieve is anything like that feeling that I had in Bilbao a couple of weeks ago, well, I mean, I sometimes get that feeling when, something pays off in my business or a client has a win. It just makes me so, so happy. But this was just like absolutely another level. So yeah, 80,000 fans out in Bilbao. But I hope there's been some kind of nugget of wisdom in here. Maybe you can go check out Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey. But always remember that there's more going on in the background than you know. And if you are taking the steps towards the thing that you want to achieve, stop second guessing yourself. And I know that's so much easier said than done. But if you really are struggling with it and you keep coming back to that place, then definitely get in touch with me and we can see how I can help best. But until then, I'll see you in my next video.